So welcome to this live video. It's good to be here with you guys and connect with you. So here's what I want to share. And I think you'll benefit from it because I've benefited from it. I've talked recently about making things more practical, making my teaching more practical, and I also want to be more transparent, So what I'm going to do is share a very personal example, and here's what I want to share, that when I apply the spiritual teachings and when I embody them, I get shown how well they work. And when I don't apply them, when I don't embody them, I get shown how well they work. So that's wonderful. And I think actually learning from failing to apply the spiritual teachings is just as important, because we need to see how things go south when we don't apply the teachings. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to give this specific personal example, obviously without naming names or getting into details. So I recently had this conflict with this person, and here's what I learned from it. Well, I'll start by saying what the teaching is, and then how I did and didn't apply it, and what I learned from that. So please forgive me. It always takes me a few minutes in these videos to actually get into it, but now it's happening. Okay, so what the teachings say, the teachings that I teach and study and try to live by, is that, before you engage in a critique of someone else's behavior, God forbid, or even before you engage in trying to share your feelings about how that person has impacted you, first you need to build a bridge. You need to connect with the person. If you haven't connected with the person, they're not going to be as able or willing to listen to you and to you sharing your feedback. So in this specific example, somebody engaged in behavior that was painful for me, quite painful. And so I went to give this person feedback about how their actions had impacted me. And what I wish I had done, or what I learned and what I'll do next time, is first empathize with this person and get curious about where they were coming from. Why did they do what they do from their perspective? What was motivating their actions? And I didn't remember to do that this time. So what I did do is I said to this person, look, here's my definition of integrity. Now, by my definition of integrity, which I explained, your actions were not in integrity. So I'm confessing, that's how I spoke. And, but what I didn't remember to say, which is super important, is you don't have any obligation to live by my values. That's the thing, is like we make people wrong for not holding our values. And I actually wasn't doing that, but I didn't remember to say so. So there's then an implicit assumption that I'm making that person wrong. In fact, I just said, here's my definition of integrity, and your actions didn't fit that definition. But the fact is that it's nobody's obligation to hold the same definition of integrity that I do. It's their absolute right, as far as I'm concerned, it's their right to hold a different definition of integrity. And I honestly believe that this person did abide by their definition of integrity, right? So here's what I learned about that interaction. And of course I could say, oh, I knew better, but we need these experiences of not applying the teachings to see how valuable they are, right? So here's what I learned. That what I want to do is first empathize if possible, or at least ask, get curious and say, hey, but actually even before I go to, those actions were hurtful, painful for me. And I know there's a strong compulsion for me, it's a strong compulsion for you guys to just go straight to, hey, you hurt me. Your actions were painful for me. But you know what? that person didn't want to hear that, wasn't ready to hear that, but might have been ready to hear that if I first said, hey, where were you coming from there? If I got curious. It's actually about caring about what is going on inside another human being who's hurt you, who's upsetting you, who's angering you. Because if I don't care about what's actually happening in them, there's not going to be a real connection. And if there's not a connection, I am not going to get my needs met in that situation. So that is like super, super important insight, I think, you know. So what I would like to do, and often do, I just didn't in this situation, say, hey, where were you coming from with those actions? What motivated you? Why? What's alive in you? Why do those actions make sense to you? Or why do they, how do they fit in with your definition of integrity? I'm really curious. I really want to know that. And then if I heard from that person where they were coming from, then I would be able to reflect that back and say, oh, okay, I understand where you were coming from and, why you did what you did. And now I want to share, if you're open to it, that those actions were really painful for me, were upsetting for me. So this is a time of divisiveness, as everyone's observing, but it's also a bigger opportunity than ever to build bridges. And I think that's how we have to start in these interactions. Empathizing if possible, and even if it's not, getting curious, asking questions. Ask before evaluating or critiquing. Just ask with a genuine spirit of curiosity, if possible, what's really going on for you. Okay? So, and also to share our values without making the other person wrong. And this person doesn't know me very well, so I should have said, look, sharing what my value is and that your actions didn't align with my values doesn't mean that you're wrong or bad, or that I think you're wrong or bad. I think, with spiritual maturity means not needing to believe the other person is wrong or bad if their actions are not aligned with yours. Spiritual maturity is sharing your values without the oppressive implication that of saying to the other person, your values should be like my values. And if they're not, you're in the wrong. And I absolutely don't believe that to be true. I don't believe that the other person is in the wrong if their values don't match mine. Because values are not an objective feature of reality. There's no value that everyone should have, because if there was, everyone would have it. Right? Values are something we choose. And people choose their values on the basis of their experiences and their the inner work that they've done. And so it never, ever, ever helps or accomplishes anything of worth to judge someone else's values and say they're not as they should be. They should be different. They should be more like my values. I think that is burning bridges instead of building bridges. So, I was already clear about that before this interaction I'm talking about, but I didn't make it clear to the other person. You see, I didn't say, hey, I'm sharing my value and how your actions weren't aligned with my value and how they impacted me, but I understand and believe that you're not wrong for having a different value or for defining integrity differently. Okay, so the other aspect of this interaction that I want to mention, because I think it is very, very commonplace in spiritual communities that people are willing to hold space for what's true for someone else only up to a point, and they engage in a subtle form of spiritual judgment, which certainly I've done in the past as well. I think we've all done it. The subtle form of spiritual judgment is certain emotions are not okay, certain expressions are not okay, and I think in reality, there's no such thing as a negative emotion. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. There are harmful ways to express certain emotions, and there's not harmful or even beneficial ways to express those same emotions. Okay, so in this example, this other person that I'm talking about was willing to hold space for what I was feeling, except when I was angry. And this person didn't say, but through their actions implied, it's not spiritual to be angry. Because when I was expressing my feelings of anger, this person just shut down the conversation completely and ended it. So, the thing is, I think we've got to get over the idea that certain emotions are not spiritual, are not permitted. We can't hold space for those, What we can do is say, if it's true, the way you're expressing this emotion right now is really hard for me to hear. And I'm finding it painful, the way you're expressing this emotion, if it is, And that's a very different thing from kind of the rejection of the emotion itself. And I think anger is a good example, because in the spiritual communities and conscious communities, people implicitly hold the view it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be grieving, and we'll show up for your sadness, we'll show up for your grief. But it's not okay to express other emotions like anger and say, hey, I'm really angry about what you did, So I think we express implicit judgments by not even saying judgmental things, but by rejecting that form of expression and say, I'm not going to relate to you if you are expressing that emotion. Okay, so that's my personal share, that's my personal experience, and I want to go on to discussion about these issues, because I think it's absolutely crucial that we unpack, examine our tendencies to judge each other in ways that burn bridges instead of build them. Okay? And so just to go back to one earlier thing and clarify it slightly more, if I say your actions don't fit my definition of integrity, that's not a judgment. That's not a personal judgment. That's an opinion. It's a personal judgment if I say, therefore, you're not as you should be. Therefore, you're wrong or bad in some way. Of course, I may not use those words. I may use much more fancy words. But if in some manner I'm saying, you are not as you should be, you ought to be different, that's the personal judgment, okay? So let's take it to a specific example in something we're all concerned about, right? When I made a post saying, by the commonly accepted definition of fascism, DT is a fascist, somebody said, it's bad to judge others, label or pathologize them, which indeed I teach. It's not that it's bad, but it's non-beneficial to judge others, label or pathologize them. But then I pointed out, look, fascist is an insult in our vocabulary, but it's also a political term. And it's not, it can be used as a political term rather than a judgmental one. And indeed, and I think this is really crucial, as a spiritual practitioner, I can say, DT, by the commonly accepted definition, is a fascist without needing to believe he's bad, wrong, or evil. I don't need to believe he's bad, wrong, or evil in order to oppose him. Okay? In order to say, no, I don't agree with what you're saying, and I'm going to put my words, my mind, my heart, and body in the way of what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to non-violently resist what you're trying to accomplish. I do not need to make him bad or wrong. I do not need to believe he's evil in order to non-violently resist. And we have great examples of this, you guys. We have the obvious greatest 20th century examples, Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., where Martin Luther King was a deeply, deeply spiritual man. He did not need to believe that his opponents were bad, wrong, or evil in order to do what he did. And indeed, he didn't believe that. He just he focused on what felt right, which was to place his words, his mind, his heart, and his body in the way of injustice, to block injustice, to nonviolently resist injustice. But he truly, truly believed in the Christian teaching and lived and embodied the Christian teaching that everyone are the children of God. Everyone's the children of God, and everyone is in a sense redeemable in God's eyes. Everyone has a good heart somewhere in there, whether it's buried or not. And I think, that's not exactly how I would say it, but that is how Martin Luther King Jr. Articulated it and lived it, So I don't need to demonize DT or anyone else in order to nonviolently resist his policies, okay? And in my personal life, I don't need to demonize anyone or make them wrong or say they should be different from how they are in order to say, look, if your actions turn in my direction, I'm going to oppose them. If your actions turn in the direction of people who cannot defend themselves or who are powerless or helpless, I'm going to oppose them, But I understand that people do what they do because they are just trying to get their needs met in the best way they know how. And it may not look like that to us, but when people are really scared, they try to get their needs met in ways that seem insane or nonsensical to us. But look at yourself. When you're really scared, when you're really hurt, when you're really angry, do you not try to get your needs met in ways that are actually counterproductive? So, like somebody posted, we will not resolve the problem of DT unless we see how he exists within us. We have to see how, when we're in that condition of whether it's confusion, fear, anger, self-righteousness, we also try to get our needs met in ways that are ultimately counterproductive. We don't have that clarity of insight in those moments, right? So as this person said, I forget who it was, we each have to solve or resolve or come to terms with what DT represents in us before the external situation is going to resolve, I wouldn't put it that causally. I think it's more that resolving it within us will facilitate resolving it externally rather than cause it. We can't be sure about that, right? Okay, so a great philosopher put it this way, and I think this is a great way to explain it. He said, this was a philosopher like 100 years ago, saying, if you see a child about to fall into a well, you don't need to debate the morality of the action. You simply rush forward and grab that child and keep them from falling into the well. You don't need to debate whether that's morally right or wrong. You just do it. And in the same way, you don't need to debate whether someone else's actions are morally right or wrong, or whether they're bad or evil, in order to oppose them. That's the point I'm trying to make, Just like you can work for the benefit of the environment without needing to believe the negative story that, the earth, we're destroying the earth, we're totally screwing it up, we're all, likely to die horribly as a result, etc., etc. You just go with that impulse to help and trust the unfolding of life. That's what I experience, that's what I live, that's what I believe. Because if you hold the negative story, it's depleting. It depletes life energy. It depletes your prana. So if you believe, everything's getting worse and worse, and the planet's getting trashed, it's depressing, it's depleting. Whereas if I say, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but I care about the environment and I want to step up and help, Or I don't know. I don't actually know in my heart whether Bannon or DT or any of those people, I don't know, or Pence, I don't know if they're evil, or I don't know what that even means. I don't know what's going on in them. I don't know what's going on in their heart. I don't need to judge, pathologize, or demonize them, but I do need to, when they articulate policies that I feel in my heart to be out of alignment with our ultimate unity and with our ultimate harmony, then I'm going to say, no, that's not okay, and I'm going to put my body, mind, and words in the way. And I'm going to make it difficult for them, even though I don't blame them for the views that they hold. If they could hold other views, they would hold other views. Okay? If they could see the falsity or flaws in their views, they wouldn't hold them. Right? So they're doing what they think is the best thing. We've got to remember that, And Alan Watts said it perfectly. He said the Inquisition, the Catholic Inquisition, which, tortured people and burned them at the stake and stuff. So the Catholic Inquisition was a distorted expression of deep caring for humanity. And he said, look, if you honestly believed that your fellow human was going to go to hell and be tortured for all eternity if they didn't accept Jesus Christ in this particular way that you think he should be accepted, if you honestly believed that, you would go to any lengths to preserve them from such a fate. Now, to us, that belief is insane. Yes, but still, the people who did the Inquisition honestly believed that these people's souls were in danger of eternal damnation and torture. And therefore it was morally right to go to any lengths to save them, to save them from eternal damnation. Even burn them at the stake. Why did they burn people at the stake? Because they hoped that in the last moment, those people would repent and say, I accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, or whatever they wanted them to say. They hoped they would repent and their souls would be saved and they would die burning at the stake, but they would go to heaven. These people honestly believed that, you guys. So, you see, a distorted expression of deep caring for humanity. The problem there, from our perspective, was the belief. The problem was not that they were evil. The people who did the Inquisition were not evil. The problem is that they believed something that that we believe is wrong. But we're in the realm of belief. How can you just say, no, you're wrong, people won't go to hell and be tortured forever if they don't accept Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior? Because we can't prove that, can we? So, maybe it sounds like an extreme example to some of you, and maybe it's not, to think about this new administration as something like the Inquisition, right? In the sense of people who are doing what they believe is right. Look, if you honestly believed that climate change was a hoax made up by the Chinese, as Donald Trump has said many times, if you honestly believe that, you're gonna roll back all spending on preventing climate change. That's obviously the correct thing to do, So let's build bridges. People do what they do because they think it's the right thing to do, Sometimes they do what they do because they're so angry, helpless, and hurt, they can't do otherwise. They can't help but just lashing out. But we're talking about the formation of policy, and in that realm, it's people doing what they think is right. We think it's wrong. But we're not going to build bridges by saying and believing or even feeling you're fucked up, We've got to get to understand why it makes sense from their point of view, empathize, and offer another possibility. If we understand that people do what they do almost entirely as an attempt to get their needs met by, in the best way they know how, then what we want to how we want to address that is show them a different way to meet their needs. For example, Al Gore is going to try to show DT and his administration, if indeed they take power, let's hope the Electoral College overturns it or something, but Al Gore is going to try and show DT that solar panels are a more profitable enterprise in the next few years than coal or oil or anything else, you know. And you see, that's a great example. He's saying, look, I'm going to show you a better, if more efficient, more profitable way to get your needs met. Are you open to hearing that? Okay, maybe he won't be open. Let's hope he will. But Al Gore's been talking about this, that solar panel technology is becoming so inexpensive now that it can actually be more profitable, than coal, let's say, right? That the U.S. has generated a lot of electricity through coal, by the way. So you get the idea. You get my argument here, I hope. And you understand that we have to, no matter how hard it is in our personal lives and in our political lives, understand where the other person's coming from and not evaluate them as being wrong for holding different values, but rather explore other ways of getting our needs met mutually that could be mutually beneficial. So it's, you know, yesterday was for me a very emotional day in the terms of seeing this truth in my personal life with this conflict I was talking about with this person, and in the political sphere too. And I think it's actually the same. I think the values and the conflicts that we struggle with in our personal lives and political lives are essentially the same. The reason our political sphere is the way it is because our personal lives are the way they are, you know. So, summing up then, empathy where possible, curiosity that is non-negotiable. We've got to get curious about where the other person is coming from, why they hold their views, and how they're getting their needs met. Reflecting that understanding to them, and then inviting a dialogue about alternative ways to meet those same needs, right? And understanding that values are not objective, and there is no such thing as a value that everyone should hold, because if there was, it would be implanted already in our DNA. So we need to patiently, lovingly negotiate why we hold our values and build bridges of understanding. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share today. Oh, I was going to relate it to the Yoga Sutra, so I'll do that in a moment. Maybe I'll just take some questions first. Sorry that it took me a couple minutes to get oriented at the beginning there. It's always the way somehow with these talking to the camera is like, oh, have to take a moment to get settled in. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying here. Oh gosh, I made this a friends only video. Well, I'll make the recording public. Okay, Laura says, right, the words that keep going through my mind these days are the words of Saint Francis. May I seek not so much to be understood as to understand. May I seek not so much to be loved as to love, he also said. And she says, I hear lots of fake empathy happening that's still motivated by getting the other person to understand us without offering them the same consideration. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly it. We cannot offer fake empathy. We need to want to understand the other person. We need to want to connect with them. So, as my personal example demonstrated, first personal connection, then you can build a bridge of understanding. That's your best chance. You know, and I tried to offer a critique of that person's behavior without first building a bridge of personal connection and empathy and human connection, you know. And I mean, I already knew that wasn't the right strategy, but I need the reminder. We all need the reminder. We need to see what doesn't work and reflect on it, and then say, I'm going to choose what does work. Okay. Laura also says, I wonder how much of this divisiveness would dissolve if we could express this, that we have a different priority of values based on our own experiences. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why I'm trying to be more transparent, because in our opinions and our views, we try to argue them rationally and logically, but the fact is, almost nobody holds the views they hold for logical reasons. They hold their views for emotional reasons and then justify them logically. So why the fuck are we engaging in these logical arguments? We've already seen that 61 million people voted without regard to the facts, meaning to say they voted for somebody who just factually lied more than any other candidate in recorded history. So those people are not going to be swayed by logical arguments, right? We need to talk about, look, I've had these experiences, you've had those experiences. How did your experiences create the values you're holding? Help me understand that. God, that would be such a brilliant question to ask anyone that you're in opposition to. How did your experiences create your values? Okay, let's see. I'm just seeing if you have any. I'm skimming your comments here. See if you have. So Mel says she has a recommendation. Practicing Village Forum. I haven't heard of that, Mel. If you could post more about that, that'd be great. Has really made a difference in my community, being able to more readily express anger and darker emotions without the veneer of lovey-lighty judgment. I think the key is, can you express the anger without blame? Because if you have spiritual maturity, I'm angry because of how my values are in conflict with this person's values. That might be one example of a reason, right? But this other person didn't make me angry, right? They can't flip a switch that causes me to feel any given emotion. That's impossible. They can't cause my anger. So therefore, I can't blame them for my anger, right? That's absolutely crucial. I think we can express any so-called dark emotion. I think actually every emotion is a form of the light. But we can express any emotion that people normally call dark if we can manage to avoid blame. Because if we blame, the other person shuts down, won't hear us anymore. The connection opportunity is lost. And if we can express without blame, then there can still be openness. Okay. Laura says, does violent resistance ever have a place? Well, I respect people who believe it does, but I don't think it has, not in my world, no. Because if I violently resist, then that expresses the view that my life is more valuable than someone else's. Like, people in this country tend to believe in, say, self-defense. That if someone comes at you, you should defend yourself even if it means killing that other person. And morally, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel qualified to judge that my humanity is worth more than their humanity. Of course, in real life, if someone came at me, probably, animal instinct would kick in and I would defend myself, but I hope I would retain enough consciousness, to not defend any more than was absolutely necessary. That's just my view. I don't believe violent resistance helps. And I think history bears out my view, actually, because people have violently resisted countless times in history, and it generally has not gone well. Sometimes nonviolent resistance doesn't go well either. But violent resistance, when the resistors have enough resources, just becomes war. We've tried war a few thousand times now. I think we're clear that it's never going to work. And then Laura says, do you distinguish between believing the story versus investing emotional energy in it, or do they necessarily go hand in hand? I think they necessarily go hand in hand. When you believe the story, you automatically invest emotional energy in it, and in defending it, and in trying to get the other person to agree with it, and all that's counterproductive. And Per, if I'm pronouncing your name right, says, where is the place for calling out the truth as one sees it? Well, maybe you joined late. I tried to clarify earlier that it's not an interpersonal judgment if I say clearly, here's my definition of integrity, your actions don't match that definition, my value. Of course, as I've tried to contextualize, you can't just say that. There's got to be the context of human connection. In the same way, the other day I did call out DT as a fascist, but not meaning an insult, but to say, look, his behavior and his policy plans fit most of the 14 points in the definition of fascism. That's calling out the truth, but it doesn't mean I need to believe he's demonic. I do think that he's doing what he thinks is right. Of course, part of the problem is there's some tribalism involved, meaning he does what he thinks is right for his people, and he's not very concerned about the people who aren't his people. Okay? But still, there's a distorted expression of human care there. Okay. Laura says, will you speak to narcissism, or whatever it is, where the highest value is personal interest rather than human family? Well, again, in conscious communities, we have the idea that caring for others should be a value that everyone should have. And that's how we enact oppression. So the thing is, as long as we're being oppressive, we can't really call other people being oppressive wrong, bad, or evil, can we? We shouldn't anyway. But as long as we're being oppressive, how can we non-hypocritically condemn other people's oppressiveness? We can't. So we're being oppressive if we say, you ought to hold our values. We think everyone should care about other people. But why? Where is that written? It's written in some books, some scriptures, but not in the stars and the rocks, So I happen to hold that value. I want people to care about each other and not only their own personal interest, but I can't claim it's objective. So I need to explore why I hold the value and share with others how that value can actually contribute to their well-being. That's what I do in my teaching, try to show how valuing other people and their needs can contribute to your well-being. How being selfless can be selfish in a positive sense, because it benefits you to contribute to other people's well-being. In the long run, it's one of the most beneficial things you can do. But I need to try to show how that's true, not just assert it. You see, that's our challenge. Can we try to show? Show, don't tell. Okay. Okay, I got to almost all the questions. I want to circle it back to the Yoga Sutra in a minute. Mel says, I love what you said about understanding what the needs are people are trying to get met and offering them an alternative means of having their needs met. I look at DT and I see a wounded, emotionally abandoned 5-year-old. yeah, that's what's actually beautiful about him. He wears that on his sleeve. It's obvious to anyone with contemplative faculty. you know, um, I feel like one of the core needs that's been going unmet is the need for connection and to not feel alone. And that's why we've seen the alt-right grow stronger together. They're exhibiting a tribalism, but it's tribalism that all tribalism helps people feel connected, but at the expense of other groups. So that's something we need to explore more. Yeah, so actually there's maybe more comments than I can get to because we can't go on too long. So where does this relate to Yoga Sutra? It does. Yeah, by the way, I just saw that, Mel. Yes, let's make a tribe called humanity, because that is literally the only way this species will survive. Just like there's a scripture in Tantra called Paushkara Parameshwara, beautiful, amazing scripture, maybe written by someone reincarnated from our time or something, and it says, in reality, there is no caste, and there is no color, meaning like racial color, such as white. It specifically says that. There's no such thing as being as having the color white if you're a human being, or dark or whatever. What there is one caste, the caste of all those born from a yoni. That's what the scripture says. There's only one caste of human beings, all those, born from their mother. That includes C-section, because it doesn't mean that, right? It's all those who came from a mother. That's the caste called human beings. Beautiful teaching. But back to the Yoga Sutra. How does this relate? Very simple. The kleshas. I think you guys know about those. 5 of them. The primary ones being ignorance, attachment, aversion, and egoism. Where ignorance doesn't mean being stupid or not knowing the right thing. Ignorance means distorted understanding. For example, believing that something will contribute to humanity's well-being or Americans' well-being that actually won't. Distorted understanding is avidya. We'll talk about this more in the Yoga Sutra course than I have time for here. Raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion, the Buddhists translate the exact same words as greed and hatred. So that's really important to know, because a lot of people don't understand the richness of the terms raga and dvesha. So they mean attachment and aversion, but they also mean greed and hatred. They also mean grasping and rejecting. So when we're engaged in this paradigm, you see, the thing is that they're related. You can't experience attachment without also experiencing aversion. You can't experience grasping without also experiencing rejecting. They are 2 sides of the same coin. And it's vital that we realize that, So that's why we cultivate something that's not in that paradigm called openness. So neither accepting nor rejecting, neither approving nor condemning, but exploring with love and curiosity, like I was talking about earlier. Where are we coming from? What feelings and experiences are motivating our actions? Deep understanding is necessary. And we compulsively go to raga or dvesha. I like this, I don't like that. Approval and rejection. What if we could just practice suspending that impulse? Don't go in either direction. Stay in the middle. The madhya nadi, right? Stay in the middle. Just be like, I'm open to exploring instead of compulsively approving or rejecting. How else are we going to build bridges in this current situation, you guys? And then asmita, egoism, means attaching to a self-image. When you attach to a self-image, you defend your self-image at almost any cost. You want people to see you in a certain way, and that becomes more important than human connection, and I would say that is fatal. Do not make the defense and justification of your self-image more important than human connection if you want to experience harmony, if you want to experience joy in life, if you want to experience unity, if you want to see our human potential even slightly realized. We have got to make connection more important than defending or justifying our self-image, any self-image, you know. So when you feel that impulse to go to defending the self-image, explaining yourself, justifying yourself, making the other person see you, right? Instead, ask, well, how can I connect? What's the most direct route to human connection here? That's what I want. That's all we really want. And defending, and even successfully defending our self-image, is a poor substitute for the feeling of deep connection to all beings, you know, and that starts with the ones immediately around you. So those are the kleshas that gets translated as affliction. I don't think affliction is the best translation, but we're going to explore them in more depth in the Yoga Sutra course. I don't, as you guys know, I don't like self-promoting, but I do just want to mention there's only 2 more days to sign up. So please do. And we're going to go deep together for months on end in that course. And it's not too much, because it's just, 45 minutes a week, 15 minutes 3 times a week. That's all it takes to do the course. You could spend more time on it, of course. Of course you can. But it's about the longevity. It's about exploring together in a sustained manner. That's what I'm offering right now. So please consider joining the course. We've made a 6-month payment plan for those who can only afford it in that way. And that's new, if you didn't know about that. And there's 2 more days to sign up. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting each other. Thanks for loving each other. Thanks for putting your hearts and minds and bodies and words in the way of injustice, making it awkward and difficult for those policies to be implemented. That's the best we can do, and we have to trust the unfolding of life. Nothing's gone wrong. Nothing could go wrong. And, embodying with our hearts and minds and bodies and words what we believe in, while holding space for the other person's experience. It's all we can do. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you soon.